has joined the conference.
So Chris has graciously asked me to share some optimization tips with you. I'm just going to quickly walk you through a few different topics on image optimization, specifically as they relate to images that you will be receiving on your end. And perhaps you may be creating some images from like stock photography, so I'll show you how to get the best compression out of those. And I'll also show you just some very fast examples of things that that your designer, like your design team, can do to improve your image compression if you're not able to get the numbers you're looking for yourself. Okay, so with that, I'll get started. So the first thing I wanted to go over with you is I have these images here, and I wanted to go through this one just as a really good example of what kinds of challenges you have when dealing with image compression. Okay, so we have this image here. This is zoomed to 100% size, and it's a pretty big image. According to this, it's 1600 by 523. So a lot of stuff going on in here. And I thought what I'd do first is kind of walk through the different factors that come into play when you're compressing an image, just so you can kind of understand how image compression algorithms kind of work and what affects the ending file size. So one of the biggest factors in image compression is the amount of detail that is included in your image. There are ways to reduce the amount of detail either through the image compression algorithm itself or via things like blurring out details in Photoshop, but that's usually the biggest factor in how big your image is going to be. It's just the amount of detail in here. And in this image, we have quite a lot of detail. We have like the wood texture. We have all these different parts that are hanging on the wall. We have this little toolbox. We have this vice grip, like bikes hanging from the ceiling. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in this image. And so I can tell just by looking at it that it's going to be a pretty big image when it's saved out. Another thing that affects the image file size is the resolution. So, and this is kind of a this is related to the amount of detail in the image. Obviously, if you have a high resolution image, there's going to be lots of detail. Lots of detail means bigger file size. You can create a very simple image. Just here I've created a 400 by 400 image, and it's just the color green. And that's going to compress really well. As a PNG, it's 1.07K, and as a JPEG, it is 2.129K. So like the amount of detail has a lot to do with how big your image is going to be in the end. That being said, it's not like an exact science as far as judging quality. You just kind of have to eyeball it and make your own best judgment as to what the best trade-off between file size and image quality is. So in this case, I've taken the image and I've chosen PNG as the compression format over here. I'm in Photoshop Save for Web, which is what you should be using when you're saving out images for the web. And you're starting from like no image. If you have an existing image, there are better tools for optimizing it. But if you are creating a new image, like say from a stock photo or something, then you want to be going through Photoshop Save for Web. So in this case, I have this image here, and I should be clear here, I'm resaving what used to be a JPEG, so you can see a bunch of compression artifacts in here. But just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm saving it as a PNG. You can see the file size over here is 1.3 megabytes, which is a really large image. Generally, if you have something over 200K, you're doing something wrong. Generally, it's best to keep it below that number, but there are some cases where it's unavoidable, and in this case, this is one of those cases. So I've chosen JPEG here because it's better for photography. PNG is a lossless format, which means the same exact pixels that go in are going to come out of the image compression. With JPEG, it's going to kind of add visual noise to the and distortion to the image. You see, here I've turned the quality down to 0, and if you zoom in, you can see it becomes really blocky. Whereas when it's 100%, it's nice and smooth, and there's more fine detail in the image. This is the way that the JPEG algorithm reduces file size. It reduces the amount of detail in the image, and it does so by creating these 8 by 8 pixel blocks. You can see here at 0% quality, it's 63.91K, but obviously this is not something that we would want to upload to the website because it just looks really bad. So you want to generally, I think the best practice here is to just keep increasing the quality until you can't see any additional quality. So as I increase the quality, you'll see more and more detail come in. I'm just using the Shift and up arrow keys to go by 10% increments in the quality field over here. And here I'm at 20% quality, 30%, 40%, and you can see the images progressively getting sharper and sharper. And once we hit around 50 to 60%, you can't really see any more increase in the amount of detail shown. So we can leave it at 51% quality. Generally, the difference between 50 and 51% is slight, but quite noticeable. And it does bump up the file size quite a bit because because Photoshop changes how it's compressing the JPEG at that threshold, but it retains a lot more detail at 51%. So that's generally the minimum quality that I try to use. However, as I said before, the threshold is around 200K, so we're still doing something wrong here. We'll come back to this image, but I'm going to move on to some more images for now. So here I've collected a small selection of images that are currently live on Intuit.com and QuickBooks.Intuit.com, and you can see there's various use cases here. We have some product screenshots. We have a small photo. We have just simple iconography here with some text baked in. And then on the large side, we have a couple of these large hero graphics. Now, I can give you a kind of a hint for what kind of image compression format you should use. And for the most part, these have the correct image compression applied, but there are some opportunities for optimization here. So this is a 140 by 200 image. It's just flat color, and it's an illustration with some text. And this is something that the PNG algorithm is really good at, which is why it is saved as a PNG. We have this imagery here, and it's just mostly flat color. There's not a lot of detail, and so you don't really want compression artifacts applied because that would actually increase the amount of detail applied to the image, so you'd have all these weird fringing artifacts around all the lines, and I can show you what that looks like. It just looks really bad, and it's not something that the JPEG algorithm was really optimized for. So you can see here 50% quality. It looks pretty terrible, but as a PNG, it looks great, and it's not much bigger. And we can even make it smaller to match the JPEG size that we just saw. So PNG is really great for images like this. JPEG is really good, as I said before, for photography, and so this is a JPEG that we've used here. And this is 220 by 150, and it's about 10K, which is perfect. It's about the file size that we would expect to see at this image resolution with this kind of detail. So generally, the smaller the image, the smaller the file size. Like the smaller the dimensions, the smaller the file size. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have a couple of images here. These are hero graphics, and these are straight from the Intuit.com homepage. You can see one is 62.7K, the other is 165K. Now, in these scenarios, 165 is kind of large for this resolution and detail, so we can look and see if we can do anything about this. And if I take it in here and take it down to 51% quality, you can see that it reduces it by about 30K or so, 30, 40K. And one other thing that I should point out here is the use of this progressive checkbox. I'm using the progressive checkbox because it downloads the image in multiple passes. And so when you get a progressive JPEG in your browser, what it'll do, and I can actually demonstrate this, is, let me open this up in a new tab for you. And I'm going to go into Chrome's web inspector on my other screen here. You can't see this, but there we go. We've now gone into the responsive view, and here I can actually throttle my connection down to a really slow connection so you can kind of see how this renders. And this actually, now that I think about it, this may only work if I'm looking at it on Intuit.com. So let me try that real quick, and if not, we'll just move on. But I really wanted to demonstrate how this image would actually render. Whoops. So open image in new tab, and do the same thing here and refresh. Yeah, here we go. So you can see here, this image was saved as a baseline JPEG, which means that it will download in one sweep, and you'll just see it render line by line of pixels. However, I believe I worked on this image here, and this should be a progressive JPEG here, and it should demonstrate what I'm trying to talk about. Yeah. So you can see here, the first pass, it just renders kind of blocky, and you can see it's still kind of grayscale here. It's rendering in sweeps, adding more and more detail each pass, which means that the image draws faster, and therefore the perceived performance of the page is increased. So you always want to save as a progressive JPEG. All right, so going back to this here, so we have the quality set at 51%, and it's still 120K, but that's sort of in our ballpark for these hero images. We want it to be around 100K or less. If it's a little bit more, it's no big deal, but we definitely don't want it to be 200K or are 160K. Like at that range, you want to try to make it smaller if you can for this amount of this high resolution of an image, like this amount of detail. Like you really want to try to reduce that file size if possible. And then I have these images here, which I downloaded from QuickBooks.intuit.com. They're the same image, they're just at different resolutions here. This one's at 65K and this one's at 135K. And these are saved as pings. Now, for screenshots like this, where you have lots of flat color and it's not really a photo, I mean, there are photographic elements in here, but generally, I mean, you could go with either JPEG or PNG for this use case specifically. You just want to play around with which one gives you the best result. So we're going to do that now. So I'm going to take this into Photoshop. Now with a PNG, again, this is a lossless image, so it's okay to recompress a PNG because you're starting from just the pure pixels that went into it. So we're going to go in and hide everything else so there's less distractions. So one other thing you got to consider here is this has a transparent background, which is something that you can't do in JPEG. And I got it from this page, which has a blue background, so you would need to know what color is used for the background. This step might be better done by a designer, but I'm just going to go ahead and pick the color out of here just for demonstration purposes and flatten it on top of this color. So I'm going to paste that in, fill it, and then go into my layers and swap it. So now it's on top of this color. And we'll just see which gives the best result, JPEG or a PNG. So we already saw the PNG file size. It was about 120K, was it? 134K. So by taking out the alpha channel, we've sliced off about 30K, something like that. But we can do even better than that with PNG, because what we can do is we can reduce the color palette. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and I don't even need to mat this on top of a solid background because it's PNG. I can just maintain the alpha channel and just save as and just put it on my desktop. And this won't have any smaller result than what we already have, I don't think. Yeah, this is still 121K, so it's not really a material difference. But there's this great tool called TinyPNG, and you can access it by going to tinypng.com or just Googling TinyPNG. This is really great. All you do is you just take your PNG and you just drag it on the page. It's going to upload it, it's going to compress it, and now it's 27K. So this is minus 78%. So that's pretty good. And when you compare the result, keep both. When you compare the result, so again, 27K versus 121K, let's see how they compare visually. I'm just going to use an app called Kaleidoscope for this. And I'm going to split between. So the way that TinyPNG works is it reduces the color palette quite significantly. It reduces it from thousands of colors to hundreds of colors. And as you can see, this line divides the two representations of the image. On the right side is the smaller one, and on the left side is the bigger one. You can't really see too big of a difference. And we've reduced the file size by almost 80%. So let's see how JPEG compares in this scenario. Again, we're going to go into JPEG. We're going to go JPEG, and we're going to say 51% quality and progressive. Actually, no, we're not even going to do that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start at 0% and just increase the quality, as I said, until we can't see any difference. So we're still seeing a lot of fringing on the edges here. We don't really want to see that too much. Around 60%, that starts to disappear. So, and 70% it disappears more, but not really enough to matter. And we've reduced it to around 36K. So in either case, it's a huge win in terms of the file size, and it's going to download a lot quicker for our visitors. But in this specific case, Ping is the winner because the quality is significantly better, and it's a smaller file as well. So there's a good example of trying to pick between two different formats and coming up with the best result. Now, one other thing that I wanted to go over here was starting with a large image and then shrinking it to a small image, but doing so in a way that preserves the quality without having to think about like the actual quality setting. So here I'm going to go back into our Teams tools and resources, image optimization, and we go into this JPEG here. And I'm going to save this as a JPEG. So let's pretend that I just took this image and it's just a full quality image. I know it's not a full quality image, but let's pretend that it is. And we're going to save it as progressive, and we're going to put it on the desktop. And we're going to do another one starting at around 60% quality. Okay, so we have two. We have 60% and 100%. And these are roughly identical. But I'm going to use another tool called, well, I'm going to use the same tool actually, called TinyPing. We can go into another one in a second here. TinyPing also works on JPEGs. You can also go to tinyjpeg.com. It's the same thing. You can just drag JPEGs or pings in. It doesn't matter. You can use whichever URL you like. And I'm going to drag both of these in here, and it's going to make the quality recommendation for me. And it recommends about the same quality as I recommended for in Photoshop, which is around 215K for both images, regardless of the starting quality. Like it's making a smart algorithmic judgment based on, I don't know how it works, but it's magic. So anyway, you can download the images and then save them to your machine and then upload them, and they'll be much smaller than just the highest quality images that you saved out. This is, again, mainly if you just want to just get it over with and just, or maybe you wanted to compress lots of images at once, like this is a really good way to do that. Compressor.io is another tool that you can use. It's at compressor.io. And with this one, it works the same. It just goes about it slightly differently. It has different algorithms for determining image quality. It also works on JPEGs and pings and also GIFs and SVGs. It uses both lossy and lossless compression, and I'll go over the details of that in a second. But you just go try it, and then you choose your file. Well, first you want to choose which compression you want. We want lossy, so I'm going to choose my file, and I'm going to say we're going to start with 60%. And compressor.io recommends around 188K. So both of these tools work similarly well. They just make different recommendations on the quality versus file size trade-off. So you can use whichever one you like and just compare the results and see which one works best for you. So I said I was going to go over the difference between lossy and lossless compression. This is an app that I really like and it only works for Mac, but you can use Compressor.io for this too. This is specifically for lossless compression, which means, again, the same pixels going in come out. It's just, it finds a different way to save those pixels. So I happen to have this installed on my machine. You can go to imageoptim.com to get it. And I'm going to go ahead and launch it here. And it's really simple. It's just a window that you drag images into, and you can drag as many as you want. You can drag in folders full of images, which I'm going to do now. So this is a folder full of the images that I was just going over. We have the ping, we have this ping, we have this JPEG, we have these two pings, we have this JPEG and this JPEG, and it's finding various levels of reduction for each one of those images. And some of them it's finding quite a significant reduction. For example, with this ping that I showed you earlier, which used to be around 10K, it's now 3.5K. That's due to ImageOptim's, the tools that ImageOptim uses. It just finds the most efficient way of representing the same image data, and just goes and does it and just overwrites whatever you've dragged in. So there's no harm in running this. Everybody should be using it, and you should use it even after optimizing an image, because you can get additional file size savings, as I'm going to demonstrate here. But you can see even with this 584 by 359 ping, this one here, which was around 135K, it's now 110K, and the quality hasn't been reduced at all. It's the same image pixel for pixel. It's just more efficiently compressed. But let's go ahead and demonstrate on an image that I've run through TinyPing, just to show you what kind of additional savings you can get out of that. So we're starting at 27K. This was the file size that we got out of TinyPing, and we were able to reduce it by another 500 bytes. In some circumstances, you may see even more significant savings than this. I've seen anywhere from 5 to 8% more savings after running it through TinyPing. So you definitely want to be running both, and you definitely want to be running them in order. You want to run TinyPing first and then ImageOptim, because the benefits stack in that order. All right. So that was a lot to take in, but you're not alone here. Again, at the beginning of this presentation, I said that I was going to go through a couple of advanced techniques that a designer can do to help you compress your image in more creative ways. So if you're running your images through these tools and you just can't get the file size down, your local superhero designer can help you with that. So in this instance, I have this image here, which I think is around 96K. And there's not a lot going on here at first glance, but then you zoom in and you can see like there's a bunch of detail in the fabric of the suit. Like, it's not really adding too much to the image. So by being creative with how we're compressing this image, we can get some additional file size savings out of it. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this image. This was what your designer would be doing. They'd be taking the image and they'd be duplicating it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a filter that professional photo retouchers use on on supermodels to like reduce skin blemishes. It's called a surface blur. And this is going to reduce the image detail even more and kind of smooth everything out while still keeping like this text completely legible. And I'm going to toggle it on and off so you can see what I'm talking about here. It just reduces the detail in the areas of the image that have low amounts of contrast. So I'm going to do that. But then this looks kind of unnatural. So we need to reduce the opacity to bring a little bit of that detail back in, just to kind of subtly bring some of that texture back in. I'm going to drop it to about 60% and save the JPEG at 51% quality. It's usually my go-to quality standard, and that's 67.61K. So we've chopped off a third without really significantly altering the image. And then I'm going to put that on the desktop and throw it into ImageOptim. That'll slice off another couple of K. So again, really important to optimize the image and then put it through ImageOptim for that last little bit. All right, one more example here is another thing that a designer might help you with. Here we have that same image that I showed you earlier. And again, this one is a challenging one because there's so much detail in the image. I told you I'd get back to this, so now we are. And again, this is 231.2K. And we can help with this by doing this. I'm going to go into here. I've masked out the guy in the front. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to create a quick mask. And I'm going to select just the background. And I'm going to do a lens blur on it. And this will kind of simulate the kind of effect that you get from a high-end SLR. This is a little too much. We can't see any of his environment, so let's bring it way back here. Just so you can kind of see what's going on. And we'll go ahead and say OK. And that reduced it to 141.4K. So we chopped off around 80 to 90K there. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And again, ImageOptim, drop it in. And there we were able to reduce it by another 6K. So that's what I have to share.